Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? That's Adam Caplan. I'm Geoff Mosher. If you're watching us through a YouTube screen, you'll probably know by now who's who. If you're listening to us, just let us know, or we'll let you know that you can also find us on YouTube. We're starting now, thanks to my colleague at 97.3 ESPN, Hunter Brody, for producing this. But we're going to start doing some more YouTube stuff as we go along. But let's get right into it, Adam. Today is Wednesday, right after the trade deadline, and surprisingly, sort of, I think for a lot of fans, the trade deadline came and went, and the Eagles really did nothing of major significance other than acquiring the defensive end, Jannard Avery. We'll get to him in a little bit. Let me just start with my opening statement, Adam, and then you can concur, disagree, whatever. I would be more upset today as an Eagles fan if I saw some of those names that we thought were on the Eagles' radar, Chris Harris, Robbie Anderson, if they moved somewhere else for a third, fourth, or fifth round pick, or just moved it all together, you would say, Howie, what are you doing? But clearly, the market for these guys, the asking price was so high that nobody wound up trading for them. And I can't kill Howie for not overpaying to get a player for just a few weeks of this team.
Yeah, that is the point here. It's not for lack of trying. They would have made 2 or 3 trades if the prices were right. Based on what I've heard, they were talking. But the whole league, I mean, you look at Chris Harris. The Broncos asking for a second-round pick is absurd. The guy turns 31 in June, so that means he's 31 next season. He's 5'9" and 7/10 of an inch. He's not 6 feet like Darius Slay. He's not 29 like Darius Slay. Darius Slay would have been a great guy to acquire, but the Lions were asking way too much. And that, you're right, Geoff. That was the story of this trade deadline. It wasn't for the lack of trying or wanting to. I mean, if the Eagles could have gotten Robbie Anderson at the price they were looking for, then they would have gotten him. So I agree with your sentiment with Roseman doing the smart thing and not overpaying. However, Eagle fans should hold the front office to task in one way. If in May or late April, whenever the draft is next year, if they do what they've done in recent years, trade away a lot of the draft picks, then what are you doing this for? If you're not going to give up 2 first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey, then you better use those picks. That was my only criticism, but it wouldn't be fair right now. But next year, you better start using these picks to get younger, because that's their biggest issue, Geoff. We've talked about it for a while. Fans know this. They know as much as we do about this roster. This is an older roster. They must get younger going forward.
Yes, I'm absolutely thrilled you brought that up, Adam. That's how I was going to transition into the next topic, and that's if you want to hold Howie and the front office accountable, you do it by saying, all right, you chose to keep these draft picks. You have an aging team. Replenish the roster. Now the pressure is on 2 people to me. It's on Howie Roseman to be a good drafter. I'd say Howie Roseman and the front office, Andy Weidel, everybody. But Howie makes the last call. So it's on Howie to fortify this roster through the draft. And then it's going to be on Carson no matter what, because he's the quarterback. He didn't get the weapon that he was hoping to probably get. Deshaun Jackson will come back. We'll talk about that. But you and I have said for months now that you just don't know how long he'll be able to go through. That injury just didn't go away. So whether it's fair or not, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Carson Wentz to continue to make this offense work with kind of some sketchiness or some uncertainty as to a speed threat on the field.
Yeah, someone I really respect, Geoff, about what you just said, it just made me think about something. Said to me a couple weeks ago that when you don't have a downfield threat and everything becomes compressed, 2 things happen to your quarterback, and not just Wentz. It becomes with any quarterback. They're going to hold on the ball longer because they're waiting for someone to break open downfield, and B, you start stunning the growth of the quarterback if you're just making him throw the ball short again, like they did last year because they didn't have anyone who can run with their decision not to bring Torrey Smith back last year. So look, not getting Robbie Anderson. I'd said it before. I don't care if Deshaun Jackson's coming back or not. Get Robbie Anderson. And by the way, that's a good problem to have. If Deshaun winds up playing 5 or 6 games the rest of the season, great. Then it's a bonus. But you don't have that, and you don't know what Deshaun's going to play in a given week. That we've outlined this injury pretty well here. Guy practices with this injury you worry about tomorrow. So it's a shame. It really is. It's too bad because I really thought if they got Anderson, that, by the way, that was the number 1 guy I thought they would get. I also thought they would trade away Big V. I thought that one had a real shot with the Browns. Niners, my understanding was, Geoff, that there's 2 rookies, shockingly, have played so well. they decided not to do anything. I think if you asked them a couple weeks ago, they were probably going to do something. Could have been Big V, could have been somebody else, but they decided not to do it. They're going to go with these two young kids until their tackles are back.
Well, I think we can look a little bit at this trade deadline, this game coming up, and then the bye week as a kind of a window, Adam, where the Eagles didn't acquire. They didn't improve the roster via trade, but they are expecting Deshaun to be back. It looks like Avonte Maddox is going to come back. To your point about the D tackles, Tim Jernigan, it sounds like he'll be back soon. So Nigel Bradham may miss this week, but come back after the bye week. So in a sense, if you remember what we said about this team going into the year, is that it was such a deep team, maybe the deepest team that they've had in quite a while. Now, obviously, some of that depth is gone because of injuries, and it's not coming back. A guy like Malik Jackson, he ain't coming back, right? A guy like Joe Osman, he ain't coming back. He never even was here. But if you can consider these 5 or 6 players that are going to come back, kind of like the trade acquisitions that you basically get for free, you don't have to give up anything other than what you were already paying them, then you go back to a sense where you start to feel that the Eagles are a little bit deeper again. They're never going to be what they were going into the year, but I think you can feel better if some of these guys can come back and stay on the field. You've already seen an improvement in the secondary just by having Darby and Jalen Mills back. Yeah,
I would say this. To start the season, I thought, and I know I was right because people with other teams told me this, and I asked them the same question when they studied Eagles roster. The Eagles had arguably a top 3 roster. I thought you and I did our all-season show. I think we agreed Dallas had slightly better roster, but the Eagles' coaching was better. I still agree with that. This, to me, was a 12 or 13 win season before Malik Jackson got hurt. One week after another, or first 4 weeks, it was one injury after another, one disaster after another. It shows you the value of depth. They're 4-4 before we get into last week's tape study. I think you're an Eagles fan, and they were 4-4 last year at this point. It could be way worse. If they were 3-5, I wouldn't feel very good about this football team. They're after this game, by the way, is very winnable against Chicago. They're clearly better in Chicago. Chicago's reeling right now. They've got issues at quarterback, defensive line. They're struggling right now. Obviously after that, those 2 games are very, very difficult. But if you look at that final 5 or 6 games, Geoff, it's really 5 games. Boy, other than that Dallas game, the other 4 are, I mean, if they don't win them, they ought to walk home. This thing could break well for them, but they're going to have to play better. Don't think that Buffalo game was as good as it looked on tape. The win had a lot to do. The weather conditions. I give the coaches all the credit in the world, but let's not get carried away with how great that win was.
Yeah, no. One thing that we'll probably wind up talking about either on Friday in the preview or even down the road is that, as you mentioned, the soft schedule the Eagles have. They're 1 game behind Dallas, and I believe week 15 the Cowboys have to go play the Rams on the West Coast, and that's a game I think the Eagles are playing either Washington or the Giants, somebody fairly easy. That could end up being a very, very pivotal game to swing the standings that week, but we'll get to that later. Before we move on from the trade deadline, who's here, who's not, I think we need to talk about the defensive line situation, because the guy that they acquired from the Browns is a pass rusher. I think you've spoke to some sources, I have too, that they really liked coming out of college. They really liked his tape as a rookie with the Browns, so they found it as an opportunity to get a guy who was not working in the scheme he was in before, may come in here, play a prominent role. But they've got, 7 defensive ends on the roster right now, and I was surprised Bruce Hector got waived and sent back to the practice squad yesterday. So do you think that they go into this game with 7 DNs? Obviously, a couple will be inactive, but that's a lot.
Yeah, I think what they'll do is 5 will dress, 2 will be inactive. Obviously, Sharif Miller, who was not supposed to play at all this season, would be one of them. And then they'll make a decision. My guess would be DeAndre Hall, but we don't know yet. They'll get through that in practice this week. Here's the real story with Jannard Avery, who was a 5th-round pick of the Browns last season. The Eagles been talking to the Browns for a while. They've been trying to trade for him for several weeks, and John Dorsey, the GM, he just wouldn't do it. Now, here's what I think from the Browns standpoint. You mentioned Avery did a good job last year as a 5th-round pick. He was a major surprise. This kid, I don't know that he's so short, 6 foot 1/2 inch. Personnel guys I spoke to said, look, 31.5 inch arms. He's shorter than you want. One guy said he's built like James Harrison, but he's way faster. He's just not as strong. James Harrison, for being 5'11", is unbelievably built, but he's got incredible explosives in his lower body. The Eagles do not have a speed rusher. They have effort rushers like Graham. They don't have a speed rusher like Avery. That's why they did this. I give the Eagles credit in this. Howie Rosen was not coming out without this guy. And don't forget, Andrew Berry, Geoff, was with the Browns last season, so he could get intel on here.
Sure.
Now here was the give back. The Eagles are giving up a 4th-round pick, which I thought was a little bit high, but it wasn't next year's 4th. It's 2021. That was the give back. The Browns were not going to get a 4th for next year. My understanding, according to a source, was another team was involved. But the Eagles wanted this kid. And you know what? You know what this says too? And I learned a lot from this transaction. I was with you on this. Like, why would you trade for a guy when now you have 7 DNs? They could have 15 DNs. It doesn't matter. You want someone who gives you something that you don't have, and I think we all learned a lot from this transaction.
So just to clarify, you think that if Sharif Miller and Deshaun Hall are the 2 inactive DNs, that they're going to activate Avery for this game against the Bears this weekend?
Well,
which would be a pretty short turnaround for him.
Look, here's what I think. Whether it's Avery or Deshaun Hall, I call him DeAndre Hall. I keep getting mixed up with the former safety. Did that guy ever end up anywhere? DeAndre Hall, by the way? That safety of the Eagles.
That's a great question. I don't know.
I haven't heard his name. Where is he? Our fans will tell us on Twitter. They're great about listening and telling us that. So we appreciate that if you guys could tell us. I don't know. I haven't seen it. Anyway, it'll be one of those guys. Two of those 3 will be inactive. That's kind of my guess. But what I understand is they see this guy as a nickel rusher and something they don't think they have. The ability to get as an edge rusher from the edge is speed. If you could have someone who could close like this kid can, based on their studying, everything they saw pre-draft happened last year. The reason why he's not playing is they changed schemes in Cleveland. Steve Wilkes does not think he fits what they do. John Dorsey held out for as long as he could. I give Dorsey credit. To get a 4th for a guy who doesn't play, well, that's pretty good value.
Yeah, that is good value. And I think it's also important to remember that the Browns added Olivier Vernon in the offseason. So they already had 2 Pro Bowl caliber, if not Pro Bowl. I can't remember if Myles Garrett made it last year, but he's probably going to make it this year. So they've got 2 really good DNs. So it's not like even a situation where Jannard Avery was stuck behind 2 stiffs and, wasn't playing well. I think you're right. The scheme has a lot to do with it. I also wonder, before we get on to the game, if because of his lateral quickness, his speed that you mentioned, his versatility, his lack of size, if they want to move him around similar to what they were hoping to do with Joel Osman coming out of training camp, kind of use Jannard, I should say, in that like Joker role where he's harder to block because you can't move. At that size, you might be able to block him a little bit easier if you know where he's coming from. But if you move this kid around, have him stand up, I wonder if that's the idea, is to basically do with him what they were intending to do with Osman.
You know what you do, Geoff? You could. My understanding is he's come in to be a defensive end, but I think what you just said is really what he'll wind up doing as well. Can you imagine in nickel, right? You have him blitz because he's small. He could probably hide. He's only 6 foot 1/2 inch. He's not wide at all. He's under 250. You could have him creep up. You could blitz him in the A or B gap. There's a lot you can do with him, but he just got here. And I'm sure that Schwartz will look at last year's tape and see how they're using him. He was pretty impactful, man. He had 4.5 sacks, and he had decent amount of pressures. This kid is pretty unique. I still think 4 is a lot to give up for him, but I get it's 2021. But this is up to Jim Schwartz and Philip Daniels, by the way. The D-line is, although it was very good last week, we'll get into the tape review. The D-line is sort of underwhelmed this season. Some of it obviously is due to injury. But Philip Daniels and Jim Schwartz, they got to get this thing going.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm kind of intrigued to see the guy play. So I hope he's active, and maybe they can throw him on the field for 5 to 10% of the snaps and just have him go rush the quarterback, which is what he does best anyway. That would be really good to see. Last year they struggled to get Golden Tate integrated, so I don't know if it's fair to expect getting a defensive end, although it's a little bit easier to just go attack the quarterback. Yep. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see him play. Let's move on to the Bills game. Obviously, I'm sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add something. Okay, you just said how the Golden Tate thing, and you talked about how defensive end or as a pass rusher is easier. I've been told this by multiple people who know way more than I about this stuff, so I'm just going to repeat what they said. When you try to integrate a defensive end, it's hand placement, it's technique, But this defense is very easy to learn. Execution is not hard. So despite what anyone outside you and I tells you in the media, they're wrong. I'm telling you from people who are actually involved. That's all I'm going to say. This is an easy defense to learn. I know that from talking to people who are very, very close to the situation. I trust them more than anyone. That's it.
Well, yeah, it should be theoretically even because the front four's responsibility is to go hit the quarterback and redirect the running back. And as we have said on this show many times, Jim really likes you to stay in your lane. He doesn't twist. They don't do a lot of stunting occasionally, but not a lot. So it's basically here's your lane, rush it, or occupy that gap. So I agree with you. It's not surprising. We've been talking about how Jim likes to keep it simple for the entirety of our podcast existence. So I think that there'll be a chance to get him out there.
Yes.
All right. So the Bills game, I like how you phrased it because I think it's a good win. I think it was a significant win. It's an important win. Some of the things we saw though that we liked, we have to also acknowledge were dictated by the elements. There's for people who think that the Eagles are now a quote unquote running team and this is their recipe moving forward and battering Ram Jordan Howard all day long. No, that was completely weather dictated. That the ratio of runs to passes was more weather dictated than anything, I would think.
Yeah, they had 30. Okay, let me give you an example. They had 33 plays on offense in the first half, 20 dropbacks for Wentz, 13 runs, including a sneak for Wentz. Yeah, they clearly were not. This is not. Despite I was wrong. I thought they would actually run more. I was surprised that they were having. Now they were short drops. They were short dropbacks. They weren't very deep. But fact of the matter is, Geoff, that they still are. They're not changing their offense. It's not going to happen. What we get lost in this media narrative, and I continue to laugh at this stuff. That the Eagles are some sort of they've transitioned because Jordan Howard has been great lately, and he has been. That they're a running team. No, they're not. The coaches will tell you. We go with what works. We come up with a game plan. They were passing more in the first half, and Wentz had 3 runs. One of them was a sneak. The other 2 were going to be passes. They're not changing their offense. It's just that Jordan Howard's look great, and that's a credit to the coaches.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up what most people aren't seeing. I guess we call it box score scouting or maybe even confirmation bias. You look and you see the Eagles ran X amount of times, and all the people who love running the ball more use that as an example. But you just even showed, even in a game with the elements as bad as they were, the Eagles still passed more than they ran in the first half. Now they were up double digits in the second half, and that's when they went to a battering Ram style of game where Jordan Howard got his carries. But even in the first half, they were still a predominantly passing team in terrible wins. So as we go forward, we really just need to repeat that the Eagles, for people saying this is what you have to do, you have to run. No, you have to have a lead in the second half, and then you can run. You're going to get that lead by throwing the ball. And with Deshaun Jackson coming back, and hopefully he makes it through the game, there's no reason to think that they're going to come out and run the ball 65% of the time in the first half against the Bears.
That's it. You got it. I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
All right, good. One thing that we can say, though, because you and I have been talking about this for a while, and we never pat ourselves on the back, so I'm not going to start doing that now. But we have talked about, even though you're going to run more, right, you have to be more creative. We've made this point that the last few losses before the Bills game that Doug seemed content to just kind of line it up, X's and O style, run his plays, and think that was going to be enough when his team was undermanned and depleted by injuries. Against the Bills, you saw creativity. You saw Nelson Aguilar with that wing counter that I've been bringing up for weeks, right? The wing counter. You saw fake screens to one side, then go to the other. You saw the pony package with Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders on the field. You saw Boston Scott as a goal line back, although there were some injuries there. But still, you saw things, and the Bills saw things that they couldn't have seen on tape, and that mattered.
Yeah, I agree. Look, it was interesting. The play calling was interesting. I was like, okay, short drop. They're not going to let him take a 7-step drop. They mixed in the run. The run was not very effective in the first half, and then what happened was they had a couple of huge plays second half, and they got a lead. And Jordan Howard's the closer. It was very similar to 2017. The Eagles were heavy pass first half, always heavy first half, and then you get the lead with Blunt. In this case, it's Jordan Howard, and you win. Now the other question is, Geoff, I want to ask you this question because you've been very out in front on Miles Sanders. So let me ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
how much more work should he get? I know that he had a couple. The one run was huge. He also had another good run. Does he earn more work right now?
I mean, look, right now with the lack of speed they have on the field, we talked about getting Boston Scott more involved. I would like to see Miles Sanders more involved, but at the same time, I recognize that I think both running backs leave meat on the bone in different ways. I think Jordan's a little bit slower to the hole and sometimes doesn't explode through the hole. He'd rather batter into guys, which I know people like, but that's not always great. And I think Miles Sanders, even on his touchdown run, the one thing you notice is his straight line speed came into play there. He got a huge hole because of a great block by Samalu and a great block by Jordan Howard, cut to the sideline and outran everybody. He still doesn't have the type of moves, and I think they'll develop that just make people miss in the open field. And then when he tries to do that, he winds up losing yards. So he's still learning his way, which you have to do with rookies. But this team, they kind of would rather put in Jordan Howard and not have to live by rookie mistakes. But at some point, you got to get Miles Sanders, I think, more comfortable being a ball carrier because that'll accelerate his ability to get the most out of him in the offense. And it's hard right now because they're kind of jockeying them back and forth. But I look, I can't complain because I think he's, sixth in the league in catches of 25 yards or more, which is unbelievable. So I would like to see him more, but I get what's going on here.
Yeah, I would like to see him get 5 to 8 carries a game. You like 2 carries a quarter, fine. That's as a changeup. As to from Howard's power, it's funny that the Bears are playing the Eagles this week. It's just I just know that Bears didn't want him back, and I give the Eagles credit. I think we were a little bit curious because the rotation was ridiculously bad in the first couple games. Like what? And then when they started Sanders the second game, they made him their featured back. I'm like, wow, this is earlier than expected. I get it because he had done so well in the training camp in the preseason. Why would you not give him more work? That didn't work. That fell on their face, so to speak. But I give Doug Peterson credit. It started in the Green Bay game. It worked, and he stuck with it. He didn't keep going back and forth. That would be bad coaching, by the way, Geoff. If you keep going back and forth, settle on something and go with it. That's coaching, and Doug and Grove done a good job with it.
What did you get from personnel sources who watch the tape? Anything on the secondary or anything on the linebacker? I thought that the defense played fairly well, even though it was a kind of a simplistic game plan.
All right, I'm going to read. All right,
run.
Yeah, I don't want to go 15 minutes on this, but let me just get through this. So this is from multiple sources who graded the Eagles tape on Monday. Both are from from teams that are playing the Eagles coming up over the last 8 games. I do this because I don't want opinions from people who aren't willing to be objective. So I want it from outside who are just. They're reviewing this for their game, so I want to know what they think. This particular game, the Eagles front got consistent pressure on Josh Allen. They made him move off his spot. Yes, he didn't turn the ball over, but they made him move. They made him hold on the ball where he seemed to be indecisive. Brandon Graham, once again, was very consistent, making Josh Allen move, and his ability to get to the quarterback in the short area showed up. He's relentless, Geoff. He's an amazing football player. Oh, this is Fletcher Cox's best game as we finish the front.
That was clearly.
His power is incredible. He picked up. I was driving when this guy gave me this stuff, but he picked up one. He literally moved one of the guards and threw him.
I think it was Feliciano.
Okay, this is what you need to know. The guy said that tells you he could stick his toe in the ground because he asked me, "Do you know what foot it was?" And I said, "I don't know what he had surgery on," but that tells you that he could stick his foot in the ground. That he's finally there, Geoff. He defeated double teams, which he had not been doing. Remember, we told our listeners about the short setting. They couldn't get to him. So it's the first time all season, Geoff, he's very, very close to last season.
Well, that's really promising because this is again, we talked about getting guys at the trade deadline who are injured, but even getting Fletcher Cox to be at 90, 100% of what he had been is like getting another player back, especially at that position that's been decimated. So that's really good. Anything on the linebackers or the secondary? I thought Nate Geary has played better than people have given him credit for. I know he's not a great run stuffer, but his coverage is generally good. I think he's holding his own okay.
Right before we get there, I just want to go over the young kids at D-tackle.
Yeah.
Hubbard struggled. One of the guys said to me that he was on the ground way too much. I can't imagine he was going to put him out there very much on Sunday. Now, Hector was cut and brought to the practice squad. He was just okay, probably below average. Bruce Hector was. Rush, yes, he went into 352 when the Eagles gave him his physical, but his hand usage, he's so raw. He just needs work. I get now why the Raiders told me they want to develop him on their practice squad, not their active roster. He just needs work. The Eagles had to put him on the field because they didn't have anyone else. It was one of these emergency situations. They got away with it through good coaching and good execution by most of the players. But what they got, Geoff, from these three kids was not surprising. These guys should be on practice squads. I don't blame anyone for it. They were down three D tackles. What the hell are they going to do about it? I can't. We like to criticize when we can when it's worthy. I can't get on them for this. They put out guys they felt that would work. They did all that they could. The kids gave effort. They're just not good enough.
Yeah. Maybe Anthony Rush can be like a young Bo Allen, a little bit bigger of a guy that you would normally think of for a Jim Schwartz scheme, but with hand technician and more burst for that size, then he can develop into that kind of player. That's the only comparison most Jim Schwartz guys are smaller and a little bit shorter, but slimmer, and he's a bigger, stouter guy.
Well, this kid, before we move on to linebackers, I could just tell you from his preseason tape was so dominant. You saw him. This is where some personnel people told me he looked like Akeem Hicks, who's he won't play this week against the Eagles. He's on IR, but he's a tremendous football player. From the massive size and the brute strength, that's what you love, but everything else needs to be taught, and he's a ways away from that. So hopefully, once Jernigan gets back, they don't have to play him like 8 to 10 plays a game, so he can learn on the run. That would help them.
All right. Last on linebackers before we wrap this up.
T.J. Edwards really showed up. Downhill, didn't hurt himself in coverage. That was one area where you were concerned. He's getting better every week. This is a credit to Ken Flajole, who's a veteran guy who, Geoff, about the L.J. Fort stuff. If you don't do what the linebackers coach wants, he's not going to get on the field. You're right about Gary, although it was his responsibility. Nate Gary's on the Beasley touchdown. He made a mistake on there, at least according to one personnel guy I spoke with. So that was a concern. Against teams that can run the ball well, the Bills don't run the ball particularly well. They try. He's going to get caught up in the wash. This time he didn't get caught up in it, so they got lucky there. Grugier Hill. Grugier Hill, this is his best game so far, coming back from the complete tear of his MCL. His tackling was better, his awareness and movement. This was it. Ironically, it's funny how Camus and Fletcher Cox had their best games.
All right, before we get into Ask Inside the Birds, I'm going to pause 1 second for Anchor, our friends at Anchor. All right, let's answer some questions, Adam, because I want to save some stuff for our Friday game preview pod on the Bills. I picked 2 questions out from the Ask ITB. First comes from Shaq Mitchell, at Shaq Mitchell, and he's concerned about some of the assistant coaches, and we've talked about that a little bit. He's wondering if in the offseason, Doug will be looking for a new cornerbacks coach and wide receivers coach. You and I don't really like to speculate on jobs. We can talk big picture about it. I think wide receivers coach is something that's interesting only because they've had 2 in the last 2 years, and they're still having issues at that position. Mac Hollins caught 0 passes in October, Adam. 0. And he was on the field almost as much as Alshon Jeffrey. And, of course, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has not gotten onto the field. So we have to see what happens at that position. Certainly they're inexperienced at that position from a coaching standpoint.
Look, they're on their 4th coach. Greg Lewis was fired. Mike Rowe did a great job. He got promoted. Gunter Brewer was let go. He was told he wasn't coming back. And Walsh was promoted. Doug, Andy Reid did the same thing. Andy was very big on not bringing coaches in from other environments. Doug, when he became the head coach at 16, I think they actually blocked 6 coaches from leaving, and Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, I know, was involved in it. They made sure that they kept these coaches. They're all good. They're all still with the staff. They've done a great job, and that I give them credit that it's worked. But Doug has decided. I know for a fact there were some coaches from outside who were interested in the receiver's job, and they decided to promote Carson Walsh. The results are what they are. They're not good enough. Now, I can't tell you because I'm not there. I don't know whose fault it is. They need to get more. Now, we're only through the halfway point. So, Shaq, to answer your question, Geoff and I got this exact question last year in November when their offense was sputtering. They turn it around. We'll see if they do that. There will be some significant questions by mid-December to finish this off. If this does not get better at receiver, or the offense, now this was a good game plan. Jeff's point was very good with the pre-snap disguise and all that. They the run play to that apparently Jeff Statland put in was great. But the fact of the matter
the
is,
pony package, yeah.
right, it's got to be better. It's got to be more consistent. It would not surprise me if there's changes next year if it's not better. We said the same thing last year, and there were.
Yes.
We don't want.
And there were.
Yeah, I'm not looking for people to get fired. I'm just telling you, covering this business for as long as I have, I know that when a team like this should be doing better. Period. And a story.
Yeah, I'll just add, I say this pretty much every year, no matter what platform I'm on. When the Eagles don't meet expectations, firings tend to happen. So we'll have to see what the Eagles do. If they don't make the playoffs, it's very, to me, if you're asking my opinion, without even naming a name, yes, I think changes will be made. Even if they do make the playoffs, there's possible if they don't win a Super Bowl, that changes will be made. So as Adam
Geoff,
said, we'll monitor.
The Chargers fired their offensive coordinator, and they won. They won.
I know.
Kevin was fired after the game. So, hey, never say never.
Yeah. Last question comes from Dimitri Borandanis at Mitcho1992 on Twitter. And he's wondering if the return of Deshaun Jackson will move Nelly back into the slot and therefore make Nelly a better player than we've seen over the last 6 or 7 weeks without Deshaun Jackson. And I think that's a fair question. I think that it's likelier that both Nelson and Zach Ertz, maybe even, I think the entire offense will benefit from Deshaun Jackson's return as long as Deshaun can stay on the field. But the one thing Deshaun can't do, Adam, is he cannot catch the ball for Nelson Aguilar. So Nelson will probably see more space, but he's got to catch the ball.
Folks, I'm just telling you, whenever Deshaun comes back, he's no lock to play this week, no matter what's been reported. And we've been telling you for 2.5 months now, exactly play by play with this thing. We've been right every step of the way. The reason why, by the way, he was not doubtful, as I said Friday, whether I would call him questionable. It's truly 50-50, no better than that. It's because he didn't have any setbacks last week. And his why I gave him a chance to play is because he had told people he was going to test it this week to see if he had a chance to play against Chicago. But if it's not right, he's not playing. So I don't care how optimistic reports are. It's truly day-to-day. Now, Jeff's right. If Deshaun plays this week, I don't care if it's 10 plays or 15 or 20 plays. It's going to make it so much easier because you have to pay attention. Folks, even when Torrey Smith was here, you had to pay attention. It makes everybody better, the tight ends, the receivers, and absolutely Nelson Aguilar, because he won't have to do as much.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up with that. Again, I want to thank Hunter Brody for producing this YouTube version and our audio version. You can catch his own YouTube channel, and if you've never seen a Hunter Brody YouTube, Adam, it's really special. I mean, the faces, the contortions when the Flyers or the Sixers or the Eagles or the Phillies lose are just worthwhile on our own. So make sure you catch his YouTube page, Sports with Broads on YouTube. We've also started a YouTube page for Inside the Birds. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, ooh, I would like to see the live video version and I'm interested in seeing more of what they're going to be putting on visually in the future, then go to YouTube and look for Inside the Birds and become a subscriber. So please subscribe to our Inside the Birds YouTube page, and the video version of this podcast will be up sometime Wednesday afternoon, and then we'll do more going into the future. I want to Adam, you'll be on today, Wednesday at 3 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN with me, Mike Gill, Ryan Rothstein. So we're on Sports Bash every day, Monday 2 to 6 o'clock, Monday through Friday. Of course, Mays and Shander are on from noon to 2. So download the free mobile app at 97.3ESPN.com. Make sure you're reading all the great coverage of Philadelphia sports on PHLSportsNation.com. They are enhancing the fan experience with their fantastic coverage of the Eagles, the Phillies, the Flyers, the Sixers. So much going on in Philly sports right now. I'm excited. I've been watching sports every night, Adam. It's been an unbelievable experience to have relevant sports teams, man.
You know how crazy I am with the Sixers. This is what I do. This was actually a great tip. I just did it. So I've done it now for 2 years. So what I do is I don't look at social when I watch Sixers games. I work until 11 p.m. every day. So what I do is I tape the Sixers game. Like, for instance, the last game, and it was touch and go. And thank God I didn't look at Twitter because I didn't want anyone to give me the final. So I'd go for half an hour to 45 minutes at a time where I'd be on the phone or I'd be working. And then I would play it back because I had put every game on a DVR. So I'd play it back so that I could search through all the commercials and not watch the foul shots. So what would take you 45 minutes to watch, I could watch in 15 to 20 minutes. So I would get done a game in about an hour and 20, hour and a half. So that way I can get work. And
that's like watching football on all 22.
Exactly. So I've been doing it because I was sick and tired of these damn foul shots. and the commercials. And I was like, I love Zoo and I love Allah. They're by the way, they're phenomenal. So I have the sound on. When I watch, when I have my back turned, I turn the game off. I don't want to know. I don't look at my phone to see, because I get alerts. I don't look. I that way I could take a break. So it's just a way to use if you have FiOS or Comcast or DirecTV, it's a good way to use your technology and make it worth it, because quite frankly, man, I have a hard time sitting down for 2.5 hours unless I have something invested in. I don't gamble, so I love the Sixers. I'm a diehard Sick fan. I went to the finals in 2001 to LA. That's how much of a fan I am of the Sixers.
Well, they're off to a great start. A little bit different style of team, but they're fun to watch, and we'll continue rooting for them. And again, you can check out Sixers coverage on phlsportsnation.com. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds. We'll be back on Friday with our preview of the Chicago Bears game, so we'll catch you all then when we come back. As always, we thank you for flying with us inside the Birds.